They laughed when a black boy claimed his father worked at the Pentagon. They mocked, smirked, and dismissed him until the door opened, and the man they said didn't exist walked in with a badge that silenced the room. What happened next? You won't forget it. They laughed when he said his father worked at the Pentagon, not because it was funny, but because he was a black boy from Dorchester, because his backpack was scuffed. His sneakers weren't brand new, and he sat quietly in the back of the room like someone trying not to take up space. At Ravenhill Prep, the most elite private school in Boston, Truth had a dress code. It wore legacy surnames, polo collars, and trust funds. So when Noah Ellis, 10 years old, stood in front of his fourth grade class and declared, "My dad works in national security," the reaction wasn't curiosity, it was a mockery. And the person who laughs loudest was the teacher. Ms. Whitmore didn't need to say the words out loud. Her smirk did all the work. It said, "That's adorable, but we both know you're pretending." It said, "Be grateful we let you in this room at all." What she didn't know was that Noah was telling the truth. What no one in that classroom knew, not the smug-faced boy whose dad ran a real estate firm, not the girl who claimed her mother had lunch with senators, not even Noah's best friend Ethan, was that the man they imagined sweeping floors or running delivery errands wasn't just real. He was in the middle of stopping a national security threat no one had even detected yet, and that man was about to walk through the classroom door. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start the day. It all began to unravel. It was a Tuesday morning in late October, the kind of day when the leaves outside Ravenhill turned the color of flame, and the air tasted like the space between summer and frost. Students stepped out of luxury cars, wearing designer coats. The parking lot looked more like a country club than a school drop-off line. Except for one car, a gray Honda Accord with a slightly crooked license plate and a faded bumper sticker that read National Museum of Intelligence, Langley, VA. Inside the car, Elijah Ellis sat in a black sweatshirt, sipping coffee and scanning something on his phone. His son Noah sat beside him in the stiff-collared Ravenhill uniform that never quite felt like it belonged on his body. "You ready for today?" Elijah asked without looking up. Noah shrugged. "It's Parents' Day preview. We have to talk about what our moms or dads do." That made Elijah pause. "You're gonna tell them, why wouldn't I?" Elijah looked at his son long and hard, then set his coffee down. "Noah, you remember what I told you about some truths being heavy?" "Yeah, but it's not a secret, right? I mean, you're not like a spy or anything." Elijah didn't answer, because the truth was, he had been, and in some ways, he still was. Noah climbed out of the car, slung his backpack over one shoulder, and gave a little wave. "See you later?" Elijah watched him walk toward the looming arch of the Ravenhill entrance, just another kid blending into the brick and ivy and privilege. But even from this distance, Elijah could tell his son felt like a square peg in a very old, very expensive round hole. And yet, Elijah didn't move. He sat there in the car for another full minute watching the building calculating. He wasn't sure why, not yet. But something was off. Inside Ravenhill Prep, Noah walked with quiet confidence, not swagger, not fear, just the determination of someone who'd been raised to carry the weight of other people's doubts. His only friend Ethan met him by the lockers. "You ready to tell them your dad's basically a superhero?" Ethan asked with a grin. "He's not a superhero," Noah replied. "But he is in national security, right?" Noah nodded. "He told me not to talk too much about it, but Ms. Whitmore said we have to." Ethan shrugged. "Then tell them." "It's true," Noah smiled. That was the thing about Ethan. He never made Noah explain himself, he just believed him. The classroom was already buzzing when they entered. Ms. Whitmore stood at the front in a navy dress with pearl earrings and that trademark look of refined detachment. "Everyone, take your seats," she announced. Today, we'll begin our Parents' Week presentations. Alphabetical order of course, Noah froze. Ellis first. Ms. Whitmore smiled. Noah, why don't you come up? 24. Pairs of eyes turned to look at him. He walked to the front, slow but steady, and faced the class. My name is Noah Ellis, he began, and my dad works for the Department of Defense. He's a national security strategist. Silence. Then a loud snort from Teeler, a boy whose father owned half the condos in downtown Boston. Sure he does, Tyler said. Does he also fight aliens? A few giggles followed. Noah's ears burned, but he kept going. He works with a team that tracks cyber threats. Real ones from countries that try to. That's enough, Ms. Whitmore cut in. Let's stay within the realm of realistic storytelling, shall we? Noah blinked. I'm not lying. Ms. Whitmore's expression sharpened just enough to be condescending. I'm sure your father does something very important, Noah. Perhaps maintenance or clerical support. Let's not exaggerate. You may sit down. Noah sat, but not because he gave up, because he'd been trained to choose his battles. And this one wasn't over. Later that day, he found his father waiting in the usual parking spot. He didn't speak. As he slid into the passenger seat, Elijah didn't ask. Not right away. Instead, he drove calm, silent. Then finally, you told them. Yeah, and they laughed. That word. It always landed like a punch. They thought I made it up. Ms. Whitmore, too. She asked if you were a janitor. Elijah's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Noah looked at him. I don't get it. You always say not to brag, so I didn't. I just said the truth. And now I'm the liar. Elijah exhaled through his nose, then pulled over. Look at me. Noah turned. I'm sorry that happened, and I'm proud of you for telling the truth. I just want them to believe me. Elijah looked away, his voice suddenly quiet. They will. The next morning, something shifted. Noah noticed it when he came downstairs and saw his father dressed not in the usual hoodie or jeans, but in a pressed dark blue suit with a silver tie and a badge clipped to his lapel. You? Going to work like that? Elijah smiled. I thought I'd swing by school. Parents' Day, right? Noah's eyes widened. You're coming. I said I would. But why, like this, Elijah checked his watch. We should leave soon. I want to be on time. Noah had never seen his father like this. Not this version. The one who commanded rooms without saying a word. The one whose job didn't need defending because it was classified. But as they drove toward Ravenhill, a thought settled into Noah's chest like thunder. They didn't believe him yesterday. But today they were about to learn who his father really was. And nothing at Ravenhill Prep would ever be the same again. If this story has pulled you in so far, if you feel the anger, the injustice, the rising tension, then don't miss what comes next. Because we're just getting started. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you never miss these powerful, true-to-life stories that reveal what happens when the quiet ones finally speak. Now let me leave you with a question. If a child tells you something unbelievable about their parent, what do? A. Give them the benefit of the doubt, even if it seems unlikely. B. Laugh it off, unless they can prove it. Type A or B in the comments. We'll be reading what you choose, and it might just say more about all of us than we expect. At 6 a.m., Elijah Ellis was already awake. Not just awake, but dressed. A crisp white shirt, pressed slacks, belt buckled with military precision. The badge was clipped to the inside pocket of his jacket. Unseen, but always present. He stood in the kitchen, pouring water into a stainless steel kettle. Every movement measured, controlled. The sun hadn't yet climbed over the Boston skyline, and the world was still wrapped in that rare pre-dawn silence. The kind of silence that used to come before missions, before decisions that changed things forever. He hadn't had that silence in years. Until now, today was Parents' Day at Ravenhill Prep, and Elijah had cleared his schedule, not because he had the time, but because he didn't have the luxury not to show up anymore. Noah needed him to be visible. Noah needed the world to see what Elijah had tried so hard to keep hidden. He turned off the stove and reached for a drawer beneath the counter. Inside a black mat phone, not the regular one, but the encrypted device issued only to personnel with the highest clearance levels. No social apps, no games, just silence. Lines and codes. He tapped in a sequence. A secure channel opened. He didn't speak, didn't have to. A blinking message read, "Eyes on location dormant network, clean, proceed." It was enough. He powered it off and then turned his focus to the real mission of the day. Upstairs, Noah stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the knot in his tie. The reflection looking back at him didn't feel like his own. It felt like armor. His eyes moved across the shelf below the mirror. Science trophies, a signed photo from a NASA tour, a worn copy of Ender's Game. He wondered if today would finally be different. If speaking the truth would matter once his father walked through that door. He doubted it, because Ravenhill Prep didn't run on truth. It ran on perception, and perception for kids like him was rarely on his side. Downstairs, his father's voice called gently, "Noah, time to roll out." Noah grabbed his blazer, took a deep breath, and walked down the stairs like he was walking into court. He had no idea how right he was. They drove in silence, but not an awkward one. Elijah kept his eyes on the road, one hand resting on the gear shift, the other drumming softly on the steering wheel. It was the rhythm of a man keeping himself in check. He knew what was at stake. He knew it from the moment Noah had come home, quiet and wounded, hiding his humiliation behind a mask of indifference, and Elijah hated that mask because he wore it too. "You nervous?" he asked, eyes still on the road. Noah shrugged. "Not really. Just, I don't want you to change anything about how you act. Just be you." Elijah smiled at that. "Son, I've spent half my life not being me. Today I'll do something different." What most people didn't know was that Elijah had once been a field operative, not some movie cliche of a spy in tuxedos and car chases, but a real one. Embedded operations cyber warfare analysis, counter-intel rotations across Eastern Europe, the Horn of Africa, and the Pacific Rim. He had seen things that didn't belong in newspapers, had done things that couldn't be taught in any classroom. Things that, if he thought about them too long, still burned behind his eyes late at night. But no one at Ravenhill would ever know that. They didn't need to. They just needed to stop reducing his son's truth to a punchline. When they arrived, the campus was already alive with parents in tailored coats, silk scarves, and watches that cost more than Elijah's car. The Circle Drive was a showroom of European engineering. Noah spotted Tyler's father stepping out of a Tesla Plaid, already talking business into his AirPods. Elijah parked at the edge of the lot under a shade tree. He didn't mind the walk. He had always liked seeing things from a distance before he entered. "Ready?" he asked. Noah looked up wide-eyed. "I think they are." As they stepped onto the path, Elijah felt it. Eyes parents glancing up, heads turning subtly. Something about him disrupted the pattern. Maybe it was the way he walked, shoulders squared, stride even, or the unreadable air about him. Maybe it was the badge clearly visible now on his lapel. Or maybe it was the way Noah walked beside him, not with fear, not with shame, but with pride. It was a small shift, But in elite spaces, small shifts made people nervous. Inside the front desk, clerk did a double take as they checked in. Elijah Ellis, he said, sliding his ID across the counter. The woman's fingers faltered slightly as she read it. Of course. Room 207. Ms. Whitmore's class. She handed them name badges, but she was still staring at the ID when they walked away. Room 207. It always smelled like lavender and printer toner. The windows looked out over the quad and every desk had a polished brass nameplate. The walls were covered in student work, but Noah's project, which had won a district science award last semester, was nowhere to be seen. Elijah noticed. Of course he did. Ms. Whitmore was standing at the front, greeting parents, with her usual polished warmth until her eyes landed on them. Elijah could see the precise moment her expression changed. First surprise, then confusion, then calculation. She stepped forward. "Mr. Ellis," she said with a practiced smile, "it's nice to finally meet you." "Likewise," he said calmly. "Noah's told us such interesting things about your career." "I'm sure he has." She hesitated. "We don't often get parents from your field here. I'm afraid we don't know what to expect." Elijah's eyes didn't flinch. Neither did the people who underestimated me in the field. They learned fast. It wasn't a threat. It was just the truth. The class began with a slideshow of student portraits and voice clips describing their parents' jobs. My mom is a partner at a venture capital firm. My dad designs eco-smart skyscrapers. My mom just finished a Senate committee draft on climate reform. Then, Noah's clip played. My dad works at the Pentagon. He's a national security strategist. He keeps people safe before danger ever shows up. A few parents turned their heads. Whispers. Ms. Whitmore quickly moved to the next slide, but it was too late. The room had changed. Elijah stood from his seat and addressed the room. "If I may?" Ms. Whitmore froze. Noah's eyes widened. The parents went silent. "I didn't come here to impress anyone," Elijah began. "I came because my son told the truth, and I wanted him to see what happens when you don't back down from it." He turned toward Ms. Whitmore. "And I wanted his teacher to know that sometimes the people you assume are invisible are the ones standing between your comfort and the chaos you'll never see." No one dared interrupt, not even Tyler's dad. After the presentation, Elijah and Noah walked the halls. Other parents nodded now. A few approached. A man with silver hair introduced himself as a former naval officer. A woman offered her thanks for Elijah's service, though she didn't know what he actually did. None of them asked if he was a janitor. Back in the car, Noah was quiet. Finally, he said, "They looked at you different." Elijah started the engine. "They'll still forget by next week. That's how these places work. But I won't." Noah said, "I know," Elijah replied, and for once that was enough. The next morning, Elijah sat in his home office, reviewing classified breach reports. One file stood out, an anomaly flag near a Boston educational network. The breach matched patterns of a known foreign threat group they'd been tracking for months. He leaned in, reading deeper, then froze the flag node. Ravenhill Prep, the timestamp. 20 minutes after he walked through their doors, his blood ran cold. Something had followed him in, but it wasn't just him at risk anymore. It was Noah. And this time, the war had come home. It wasn't the badge that silenced the room. It was the way Elijah Ellis walked in. Every classroom at Ravenhill Prep buzzed on Parents' Day. Teachers made their rounds with manicured poise, students sat straighter than usual, and parents used the occasion not only to support their children, but to network. It was as much a social showcase as it was an academic one. Everyone knew their role until the man in the dark blue suit stepped through the door of room 207. Until Noah Ellis's father arrived, Elijah didn't stride in like a man trying to prove something. He moved with quiet command, scanning the room not as a guest, but as someone trained to assess an environment within seconds. His posture was perfect but not rigid, his presence large but not loud. And then there was the ID clipped to his chest. Pentagon credentials don't usually show up in elementary classrooms, but today they did. Ms. Whitmore faltered mid-sentence. The usual melody of her polished voice tripped into silence as her eyes caught the seal, silver, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She opened her mouth as if to recover to speak, but no words came. Noah stood a few steps behind his father, watching the shift unfold like a play. For the first time in this school, the air bent toward him, not with suspicion or dismissal, but with stunned curiosity. Mr. Ellis, Ms. Whitmore, finally managed. We weren't expecting. I know, Elijah said calmly, his tone steady and firm, but I thought it was time we met. He reached out his hand. Ms. Whitmore, eyes locked on the badge, shook it almost reflexively. Around them, parents turned in their seats. A few recognized the insignia. Others simply registered authority, and it was enough to change the temperature of the entire room. The oxygen felt different. The assumptions shattered. Noah exhaled slowly and took his seat. He didn't need to say a word. His father was here, and the truth had arrived with him. For most of the morning, presentations went as planned. Tyler boasted about his father's firm acquiring another chain of apartment buildings. Sophia explained how her mother consulted on a new health bill being introduced in Congress. The room politely clapped. Parents nodded. Some took notes. Mrs. Whitmore gushed in exactly the ways she had rehearsed. Then it was Noah's turn. Next up, we have Noah Ellis. Miss Whitmore announced, her voice more cautious than before. Go ahead, Noah. Noah stood, hands shaking slightly, not with fear, but anticipation. He cleared his throat. My name is Noah, and my dad works at the Pentagon. He's a senior strategist. I don't know everything about what he does, but I know he helps protect the country, not just from what you see on the news, but from things that happen before anyone ever finds out. He paused, heart racing. This was the moment. Last week I said that in class, and people laughed. Even the teacher. A flicker of movement, Ms. Whitmore stiffened. But it was true. Just because something sounds unlikely doesn't mean it's false. Just because someone doesn't look like what you expect doesn't mean they're lying. He sat down. The silence was deep, not awkward, not resistant, just real. Elijah stood. Would it be all right if I said a few words? He asked, not as a request, but as a courtesy. Miss Whitmore gave a tight nod. He walked to the front. My name is Elijah Ellis. I've spent the last 18 years in national security. Most of what I do isn't visible. It's not on camera. It's not on the news. It's designed that way. My job is to stop things before they ever reach the people in this room. He looked slowly around the classroom. I've worked across borders. I've prevented attacks. I've helped rewrite threat models to protect cities. I've buried friends. I've sat in rooms that make decisions most people never even know were made. He looked at his son, and through all of that, the only thing I've ever wanted more than to keep this country safe was to make sure he didn't have to carry the weight of what I've seen. He turned toward the teacher. So when someone tells my son he's lying without evidence, without inquiry, because he doesn't fit a profile, you expect you're not just insulting a child. You're reinforcing a system that discounts truth based on packaging. The words landed like bricks. No one clapped. No one moved. Even Tyler was quiet. Elijah gave a small nod and returned to his seat. Noah sat straighter. Ethan beside him whispered, That was epic. At lunch, the tone had shifted. Other students came up to Noah, not with jeers, but with cautious admiration. A few parents approached Elijah, shook his hand, offered thanks for his service. Some clearly didn't understand what he actually did, but they understood power. And now they saw it, attached to a boy they'd once ignored. Ms. Whitmore was quieter now, observant, wary. When she stopped Elijah before he left, her voice was lower, her eyes unsure. Mr. Ellis, I didn't mean to offend. You did, he said, not unkindly. But intention isn't the same as impact. I appreciate you coming. Do better for the next child who doesn't look like your idea of someone worth believing. It wasn't a threat, just instruction, the kind delivered by people who are tired of being silent. What no one in that school realized, what Elijah hadn't even told his own son, was that the Pentagon had flagged a cyber anomaly just hours before an intrusion attempt coded to mimic a dormant node buried within an academic network. A node tied to the same server that Ravenhill Prep used for its administrative backend. Coincidence? Elijah didn't believe in them. So while Mr. Whitmore reconsidered her assumptions and the parents whispered about the man with the clearance badge, Elijah slipped away to a side hall, pulled out his encrypted phone and called a contact. I need a trace on the anomaly from this morning. School network cross-reference with our flagged IP schema from Sector Echo. A pause. Yes, I'm at the school now because this isn't random. Something's nesting. He ended the call and returned to the classroom, just in time to hear Missy Whitmore announce the next activity. But his mind was elsewhere. He'd come to protect his son's dignity. Now he wasn't sure that was all he'd need to protect. That evening, as the sun dipped below Boston's skyline and Ravenhill's Gothic windows reflected the pink hue of dusk, Noah sat in the car staring out the window. "I've never seen you like that," he said softly. "Like what?" "Unstoppable." Elijah chuckled. "That wasn't unstoppable, kid. That was just overdue. Do you think they believed you?" "I don't care." Noah looked confused. "I don't show up for them," Elijah continued. "I show up for you." And in that quiet, Noah's world rearranged itself. Not because his father had put a teacher in her place, but because he'd shown him how to walk into a room that didn't want to believe in him and change the way they breathe. But later that night, the second breach alert came through. Same source, same target. Only this time, it wasn't a test ping. It was a full system access attempt triggered by security protocol embedded on Elijah's own home network. The threat had followed them home, and just like that, a truth more terrifying than judgment walked in. This time, it wasn't about perception. This time, it was personal. The silence inside the Ellis home wasn't the comfortable kind that lingers after a good day. It was the kind that hums beneath your skin, warning of something unspoken, something unseen. Elijah sat in his study with the lights low, the glow of his encrypted terminal illuminating the sharp lines of his face. Noah had gone to bed hours ago, but Elijah couldn't move. Not yet. Not with the breach report still fresh on the screen. This wasn't noise. It wasn't a random ping or background chatter from a hacker kid somewhere in a foreign basement. This was sophisticated, purposeful, and worst of all, it was familiar. The breach had mirrored a methodology used only by a handful of intelligence units in the world, and only one had ever targeted him directly. Anton Volkov. He hadn't heard that name in 6 years. A ghost from the classified corridors of Blackfish, the covert mission that never made it into the Pentagon's public files. The one that left Elijah with scars no one could see and enemies no one believed still lived. Until now. Because Ravenhill, Prep wasn't just the target of mockery anymore. It had become a theater of war. The enemy had chosen the stage carefully, a child's school, a place built to feel untouchable, and that's why it had been chosen. No one expects violence where privilege protects illusion. But Elijah knew better. The breach had revealed more than data access. The embedded signal had connected even briefly with student files, IDs, class schedules, transportation logs, enough to map patterns, enough to track movement, enough to plan something far worse than surveillance. It wasn't just about monitoring, it was about leverage. Noah wasn't a data point anymore. He was a pressure point. Elijah stared at the red pulse on the digital map glowing on his screen, an active threat signature still echoing from the school network. A trail of digital footprints left behind with just enough arrogance to prove they weren't afraid. They weren't hiding anymore. And that changed everything. By the next morning, Elijah's routine had altered completely. He'd pulled Noah's school tablet, scrubbed it, then replaced the device with a military-grade alternative configured with passive alert protocols. Noah thought it was just a sleeker upgrade. He didn't question it. At breakfast, the boy stirred his cereal without eating, his shoulders hunched lower than usual. "Everything okay?" Elijah asked, already knowing the answer. Noah nodded, then shook his head. "They're still talking," he said quietly. "About you. About yesterday. What are they saying? That I made the whole thing up? That you borrowed that badge from someone? That you staged the whole thing to impress people?" Tyler said. "If you were really that important, you wouldn't be driving a car with a cracked mirror." Elijah's jaw clenched. "But I don't care," Noah added. "I just want to know if it's true. What, that they might come after you? That someone's watching us?" Elijah met his son's eyes and for the first time didn't look away. "They already are." Noah went still. Then he pushed the cereal aside. "I'm not scared," he said. "I just want to know what to do if it happens again." That single sentence carved into Elijah's chest, sharper than any blade. Because no child should ever have to ask that question. But his son wasn't asking out of fear. He was asking out of readiness. Elijah reached across the table, placed his hand over Noah's, and said, "You'll stay close to me. You'll keep your eyes open. And most of all, you'll remember that fear only works when it's silent." That afternoon, Elijah arrived early to Ravenhill Prep. He didn't check in at the front desk. He bypassed the parent lounge, ignored the glances from passing staff. Instead, he went directly to the administration office and asked for Principal Langford. The principal, a seasoned man with a salt and pepper beard and a reputation for diplomacy, welcomed Elijah into his office with reserved curiosity. "To what do I owe the visit?" Langford asked, motioning toward the leather chair across from him. Elijah didn't sit. "I need access to your IT infrastructure logs," he said without preamble. Langford blinked. "I beg your pardon." Yesterday's network breach didn't originate from a prank or a software bug. It was an external penetration attempt that matched signatures linked to foreign intelligence activity. Langford's face drained of color. "Foreign?" "I don't have the luxury of making this sound better than it is," Elijah interrupted, "and you don't have the luxury of ignoring it anymore." Langford hesitated, then reached for his phone. Within minutes, Elijah was in a secure sub-office with the school's tech administrator, a young man named Derek, whose casual hoodie and sneakers barely concealed the sweat now glistening at his temples. "I found something weird yesterday," Derek admitted, "but I thought it was just a malware ghost." Elijah leaned over the monitor. "What did it access? Student directory? Attendance logs, class schedules, bus routes? Was any data copied?" Derek hesitated. "Yes." Elijah's voice dropped low. "And did you notify anyone? I wasn't sure who to call. I was going to flag it to our external provider, but you were going to hand this breach over to a subcontractor in another state before telling your principal." Derek swallowed hard. Elijah didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of his silence crushed harder. "I'm going to need your full cooperation," Elijah said. "Effective immediately." Derek nodded, wordless. And that was the moment Elijah knew the enemy hadn't come through the front gate. They'd walked in the same door as every delivery contractor and custodial service in the building. Exposure wasn't a glitch. It was a weapon. That evening, Elijah returned home to find Noah not in his room, but seated in his father's study. Looking at the wall at the picture, Elijah had tried to hide away a photo taken years ago. Uniforms, dirt, desert, winds. A team, faces blurred. Except one, Elijah's. "You look different in this," Noah said softly. Elijah joined him. "I was different then. You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't." Noah reached out and touched the frame. "Is that when you stopped coming to school events?" Elijah didn't answer. He didn't need to, because the photo answered for him. Because war leaves its trace long after the mission's end, and now that war had come home, he walked over to the locked drawer, opened it, and handed Noah a worn black band. "What's this?" the boy asked. "Press and hold the side button if anything ever happens. No matter where you are, it pings me. Directly. No middleman. No waiting." Noah took it without question, without fear, just clarity. "I'll wear it all the time. I know you will." That night, Elijah made one final call to a woman named Ramirez, the only one who knew all of it, who had covered for him in rooms where classified meant career ending, who had watched his back in missions where backup was only a prayer. "It's active," he said. "I figured," she replied. "You don't call unless the storm's already here." "Anton Volkov, Blackfish Residuals. They're targeting my son's school." There was a pause. And then, "What do you need?" "Eyes quiet ones. And access to facial recognition pulls from anyone who entered Ravenhill." In the last 2 weeks, Ramirez didn't ask why. Because she already knew. By midnight, Elijah was still awake. The house dark. The watch on his son's wrist glowing faintly from the hallway. Tomorrow he would walk into Ravenhill again, not as a parent, but as a countermeasure, because exposure wasn't just their weapon, it would become his. And this time the truth wouldn't walk in. It would bring back up. The day the whispers stopped, it wasn't because something dramatic happened. It was because Noah Ellis stood at the front of the room and didn't flinch. He wasn't called. He volunteered. It was spring at Ravenhill. Prep and the gymnasium had been transformed for the annual student showcase. Booths lined the walls. Colorful posters, fluttered with neatly typed blurbs and project titles, stretched across trifold displays like miniature monuments to student potential. In previous years, Noah would have stayed quiet, tucked behind classmates, observing rather than participating. But this year, his name wasn't just on the schedule, it was on the program cover. His project was titled "Seeing Through Assumptions: How Truth Speaks Without Permission." Ms. Whitmore had initially tried to steer him towards something lighter, something scientific or historical, something less personal. But Noah had stood his ground. This time, he wasn't asking for space, he was taking it. The folding chairs were nearly full by the time Principal Langford stepped up to the podium. His usual practice tone had an edge of sincerity, now the kind that doesn't come from authority but from accountability. He welcomed parents, students, faculty. He thanked everyone for their hard work. And then he said something no one expected. "This year, our showcase begins with a presentation from one of our sixth-grade students, a voice that's shown us all the power of presence, perseverance, and perspective." He gestured toward the side of the gym. "Noah Ellis." Noah walked out slowly, not rushed, not stiff, just steady. He wore a simple navy blazer, a white shirt, and a small pin his father had given him, the outline of a compass, a reminder. Elijah said that you don't need permission to point in the right direction. The room quieted, not just politely, attentively. Noah cleared his throat. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "My name is Noah Ellis. Some of you know who my dad is now. A lot of you didn't believe me at first. That's okay. A few parents exchange uncomfortable glances. Noah continued. People don't always believe things that come from someone they didn't expect, especially when it breaks the picture they already had in their head. Sometimes that picture looks like someone richer, whiter, louder. He paused. But truth doesn't ask to look like you want it to. It just is. He turned toward his display where photos and quotes from historical figures, unsung scientists, black inventors dismissed whistleblowers. Lined one panel, the other side featured printouts of anonymous survey results he'd collected from classmates and teachers about bias, trust, and what kinds of voices they were most likely to believe. He pointed to one graph. This showed that over 60% of students and adults at this school said they automatically trust someone more if they dress a certain way or speak a certain way. That means some people never even get a chance to be heard because they don't look like what you're expecting. He faced the audience again. I used to think if I stayed quiet, things would just work themselves out. But silence isn't safety, it's surrender. He looked at Miss Whitmore. Then, not with anger, with clarity. And I learned that the only thing more dangerous than someone lying is someone telling the truth and being ignored. He finished simply, "Thank you." There was no applause at first, just a long moment where everyone had to sit with what they heard. Then a single clap, then another, and then the room filled with something louder than noise, respect. Not because Noah had shocked them, but because he hadn't needed to. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't thrown anything back at the people who dismissed him. He had simply spoken, and this time they listened. After the presentation, Elijah waited for him by the far doors, arms crossed. Expression unreadable. He hadn't offered advice before the showcase, hadn't helped him rehearse. He knew this had to be Noah's, but now he let the pride show. You led with facts, finished with truth, didn't flinch. Noah smiled, tired but taller. Somehow, I didn't want to make it about you. You didn't, Elijah said. You made it about everyone who's ever been told they're not enough just because they didn't come in the right wrapping. Ms. Whitmore approached them slowly, her hands clasped in front of her. Noah, she said carefully, that was remarkable. Thank you, he replied, neutral. I hope you know, she added, that I've been learning too. He nodded, then surprised her. Will you add a new module to your curriculum next year? One on implicit bias. She blinked. Bias. You taught us about historical conflict, about power, but not about where it lives now. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. I'll speak with Principal Langford. Noah tilted his head slightly. Good. Because if I've learned anything, it's that silence doesn't mean peace. It just means someone's not listening loud enough. Elijah said nothing. He didn't need to. Noah had said it all. The weeks that followed were filled with subtle but meaningful changes. Security at Ravenhill was upgraded, not just the cameras and badges, but in how it trained its staff to handle threats that didn't come with sirens. Diversity training was no longer a checkbox. It became a dialogue. Ms. Whitmore joined a mentorship group supporting underrepresented students, not out of guilt, but because she finally saw the weight her silence had carried. And Noah. He wasn't just that kid whose dad worked at the Pentagon. He became the voice students sought out when something wasn't right. He helped younger kids who were afraid to speak up. He led a peer roundtable that met after school once a week, and he started writing small essays, big ideas on paper. He was still just 11, but inside, he was becoming someone his father had never dared hope for so soon. Someone who understood the difference between strength and presence, between silence and strategy. One afternoon after school, Elijah took Noah for a walk along the Charles River. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that only spring afternoons in Boston seemed to know. Gentle a little breeze, just enough sun to make everything feel like it mattered. They sat on a bench overlooking the water. "Can I ask you something?" Noah said, skipping a pebble into the river. Of course, if they hadn't believed me, if you never came to the school, what would have happened? Elijah took a long breath. You would have survived it, but you would have carried it. Like you. Elijah looked down at his hands. Yeah, like me. Noah was quiet for a while. Then he said, I think I want to do what you do, but different. How different I want to protect people too, but not just with defense systems or intelligence. I want to build something. Elijah smiled. You already are. They watched the river for a while, and somewhere in the quiet, the pain of the past weeks didn't vanish, but it softened. Because healing doesn't roar. It arrives slowly, when truth is finally believed. 3 months later, Noah's essay, Assumptions Are Loud, but So Is Truth, was published in a national student writing contest. The judges were stunned by the clarity, by the restraint, by the impact. It ended with a single line. Just because you speak quietly doesn't mean you have nothing to say. Sometimes silence is where revolutions begin. And the revolution, it had already begun. In a boy, in a classroom, in a city where silence once ruled the front of the room until a new voice walked in and changed everything. In a world where truth is too often filtered through skin color, wealth, or pedigree, the story of Noah Ellis and his father Elijah began not with fireworks, but with a whisper that carried centuries of dismissal, doubt, and quiet humiliation. It echoed through the polished hallways of Ravenhill Prep, where privilege disguised itself as merit and bias hid behind smiles, too rehearsed to be real. At the center of it all was a 10-year-old boy, thoughtful, quiet, observant. A boy who dared to say something his teacher didn't believe, not because it was implausible, but because it didn't fit the picture she wanted to see. He said his father worked at the Pentagon. The room laughed. The teacher smirked. And Noah, standing alone, bore the sting of having his truth invalidated in front of his peers, not just by children, but by an adult who wielded power over him daily. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was institutional rejection. A warning: don't reach beyond the story we've assigned you. But stories have layers, and this one was just getting started. Noah's father, Elijah, wasn't the janitor some had assumed. He wasn't a man with a wild imagination or a borrowed ID badge. He was one of the Pentagon's most trusted counterintelligence strategists, a man whose career had been shaped by secrecy, shadow, and sacrifice. He had chosen to stay in the background to protect his son from the very weight that now came crashing down on him. But when truth is mocked and silence becomes complicity, even a man trained to disappear knows when to walk into the light. Elijah didn't enter Ravenhill to prove a point. He came to neutralize a threat, a real one. What started as mockery soon unraveled into something darker: a digital breach, a cyber espionage threat linked to foreign actors, a school where the children of diplomats, defense officials, and top-tier scientists unknowingly carried exposure in their backpacks. And in the eye of this storm was Noah. Elijah acted. He investigated. He confronted. He protected. And in doing so, he showed his son what strength looks like, not through domination or loud retaliation, but through measured, unwavering truth. On Parents' Day, when Elijah entered the classroom in a crisp suit with a real badge and a presence that could not be denied, the air shifted. Miss Whitmore's condescension froze. The smirks evaporated. And for the first time, the truth didn't have to beg for belief. It walked in tall, calm, undeniable. But this wasn't the end. It was just the unmasking. Because beneath that moment of vindication was an operation decades in the making. Enemies from Elijah's past, were exploiting student data to gain access to government networks, and they had chosen Ravenhill as their hunting ground. The mockery of a black child became the perfect smokescreen for espionage. Who would believe him? Who would listen long enough to see what was really happening? No one until it was almost too late. A coordinated attack, a lockdown, a surveillance device disguised as a janitor's cart, the kidnapping of Noah from within his own home, and a chilling message. The boy for the files. But Elijah didn't crack. He chased the threat across state lines. He used every tactical skill he'd acquired across his classified career, not for glory, not for vengeance, but for love. He faced his past, an old enemy named Anton Vuluk, and reclaimed his present. When Noah was rescued, it wasn't just the end of a mission, it was the beginning of something neither father nor son had anticipated. A shift in the silence, the end of pretending, and the birth of a new voice. Noah returned to school not with fear, but with resolve. He stood in front of his classmates and spoke not about what had happened, but about what is still happening every day in classrooms across America. About how quickly we decide who to believe, about how easy it is to dismiss someone based on the wrong haircut, the wrong accent, the wrong zip code, and about how powerful it is when someone decides to speak anyway. His words didn't need fanfare. They simply landed, like truth always does when it finally has space. He spoke for the overlooked, the misjudged, the children told to tone it down or be realistic, and the room listened. Even Mrs. Whitmore, even Tyler. Because even when pride is loud, truth is louder when it's delivered by someone who has lived it. What do we learn from all this? We learn that exposure can be both a weapon and a light. We learn that silence, while comfortable, can be more dangerous than noise. We learn that sometimes the most heroic thing a parent can do is not shield a child from the world, but show them how to walk through it without losing themselves. And we learn that change doesn't start when the system apologizes. It starts when someone who was never supposed to lead does. Noah Ellis, in standing up, didn't just change his classroom. He changed the conversation. He made a school confront its shadows. He made adults question their filters. And he reminded every child watching that your truth doesn't have to shout. It just has to stand. Even when the room doesn't want to hear it, especially then. The lesson. What this story teaches us. This isn't just about a father and a son. This is about all of us. In a world increasingly shaped by appearances, algorithms, and assumptions, this story reminds us that the loudest truths are often the ones dismissed earliest. We are conditioned to trust status, not substance, to associate truth with volume or pedigree or polish. But the truth doesn't care about any of that. It simply is. Elijah Ellis represents the quiet protectors among us, the parents, the mentors, the guardians who build shields for others without applause. Noah Ellis represents the next generation, the ones who refuse to inherit our silence, who use their voices not to repeat old mistakes, but to reframe the narrative. And Ravenhill, prep. It's everywhere. In every workplace, every institution, every online space where doubt is reflexive and validation is unevenly distributed. So what can we do? Start by listening more than reacting. Question your own assumptions. Pause before you dismiss someone just because they don't match the picture in your head. And most importantly, amplify the voices that were never supposed to lead. That's where real change begins. Now let's turn the reflection to you, the listener. Which response do you believe causes deeper damage to a young person's confidence? A, being openly ridiculed for telling the truth. B, being silently dismissed and ignored. Comment your answer A or B below and tell us why your story might inspire someone else. Do you agree with the lesson from this story? Have you ever been in a situation like Noah's or Elijah's? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let others in the community learn from your perspective. We believe every voice here matters, and yours could be the one someone else needed to hear today. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes or touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support gives us the motivation to continue creating more honest, inspiring, and meaningful content. And if you'd like to support the work we do, especially in these early stages, where creating quality stories takes time, heart, and resources, consider making a small donation. Every contribution helps us grow and keep this mission alive. Together, we're not just telling stories, we're changing conversations, one truth at a time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, next time someone speaks their truth, especially when it's inconvenient, listen, because the greatest heroes don't always enter with applause. Sometimes they walk in through the school doors, quiet but unstoppable.